I never thought a tattoo could become more than just a simple design on my skin. For me, it was just that, art, a way to carry something meaningful with me. But life has strange ways of teaching you lessons when you least expect it. It all started as a whim, something I decided to do one ordinary afternoon without thinking much about the consequences. A griffin. That's what I chose. Majestic, imposing, a mythical creature symbolizing power and protection. In my mind, it was perfect, an ancient piece of history inked onto my arm. I remember how, leaving the tattoo studio, I felt excited. It was like carrying a talisman, something that, in some way, connected the present with the ancient. But what I never imagined was that this bond would be much more literal than I had thought. At first, everything seemed normal. The ink healed well, and the tattoo looked amazing. But then, something began to change. One night, while looking at myself in the mirror, I noticed something different. A tiny detail, or at least that's what I thought. But I shrugged it off. Who obsesses over how a tattoo looks every day, right? However, I soon realized it wasn't just my imagination. Have you ever wondered what would happen if a tattoo came to life? Neither had I, until it did. But it wasn't until it was too late that I understood how dangerous it could be. You might be wondering, how serious could it be? Well, I assure you that what started as a fun and absurd story quickly turned into a nightmare I never thought possible. And all because I didn't take the initial signs seriously. It all started on a Saturday afternoon. I had spent weeks thinking about what tattoo to get. I wanted something symbolic, something that represented my connection to history and mythology. After some research, I decided on a griffin. The blend of lion and eagle, two majestic creatures, had always fascinated me. In Greek mythology, griffins were said to guard sacred treasures, a sort of guardians between two worlds. I liked that. I felt it was something powerful I wanted to carry with me. The day of the appointment arrived, and the tattoo artist, an experienced guy, explained the whole process to me. He seemed excited about the design. The session was long, almost 3 hours, but in the end, there it was, my griffin, with its wings spread and claws gripping my skin. I looked at myself in the mirror and smiled. It looked better than I had imagined, every detail, every line seemed to be alive, although at that moment, I didn't realize how literal that phrase would become. The first few days were normal. Like with any tattoo, it needed care, applying cream, avoiding the sun. Every time I saw it, I felt more connected to it. I felt I had made a good decision. I even showed the tattoo to some friends, and everyone agreed it was impressive. But something happened in the first week. At first, it was a strange sensation, something I could almost ignore. Like a faint vibration under the skin, right where the griffin's wings were. I attributed it to the healing process, my body adjusting to the ink. But soon, that sensation grew stronger. And then, one night, while I was in front of the bathroom mirror, I saw it, the griffin moved. Just a small gesture, as if its claws tightened, barely perceptible. I was frozen, but then I told myself it must have been an optical illusion, something caused by the light reflection or my fatigue. How could a tattoo move? I thought. It's just ink. It's on my skin. It can't do anything. I laughed at myself and turned off the bathroom light, ignoring the small doubt that had begun to grow in the back of my mind. But the sensation didn't go away. Over the next few days, every time I looked at the tattoo, I felt that something was changing, as if the design wasn't the same every time I looked at it. At first, it was small details, the griffin's feathers seemed more defined, its eyes brighter. But over time, I noticed its claws were in a slightly different position. The strangest part was when a friend asked if I had touched up the tattoo. No, I haven't done anything, I replied, nervously. I started comparing photos of the tattoo right after it was done, comparing every detail. And what I saw left me speechless. The tattoo was not the same as the one I had gotten on the first day. The wings were in a different position. The details of the face were fiercer. There was no doubt something was changing. I tried not to give it much importance. After all, what was I supposed to do? Run to the doctor and say my tattoo was moving? Who was I going to tell something so absurd without sounding completely insane? I kept telling myself it couldn't be real, that I must be exaggerating. But what if I wasn't? What could it mean for a tattoo to change on its own? That's when I started to feel there was something more, something I couldn't quite understand. As if the tattoo wasn't just a design, but a doorway to something unknown, something that had yet to reveal its true nature. Days went by, and although I tried to ignore it, I couldn't shake the idea that something strange was happening with my tattoo. It was no longer just a sensation, something almost intangible. No, now it was something more physical, more evident. Sometimes, I felt as if the Griffin weighed more, as if my arm carried more than just ink and skin. But how do you explain that to someone? It was absurd, right? I kept telling myself it was just my mind playing tricks, that maybe I was so obsessed with the design that I was starting to imagine things. However, one night, everything changed. It was around 2 in the morning when I woke up from a disturbing dream. Something had jolted me awake, but I didn't know what. My room was in complete darkness, with only the faint glow from the street coming through the window. I sat up in bed, trying to calm down, when I felt a sharp pain in my arm, right where the tattoo was. Instinctively, I put my hand on the spot, and I swear, I felt something move under my skin. Not a spasm or a muscle twitch, no. It was different. It was as if something alive was there, just below the surface. I jumped up and ran to the bathroom. I turned on the light and stared at myself in the mirror. My heart was pounding, and I could feel the adrenaline coursing through my body. I took off my shirt and examined the tattoo closely. At first, I didn't notice anything unusual, but as I looked, my eyes widened in horror. The Griffin wasn't in the same position as before. Its wings, which had originally been extended, now seemed to be semi-closed, as if it were preparing to move. And its eyes. Oh God, its eyes. What had once been simple ink strokes now seemed to have a shine, a life of their own. It was as if it were watching me. How was that possible? I backed away, fear growing inside me. I told myself I must be hallucinating, that it was exhaustion, or maybe the light, but deep down I knew it wasn't. I knew what I was seeing was real. I tried shaking my arm, rubbing the skin, but the tattoo remained there, now still, as if mocking me. That same night, I tried not to think about what I had seen. But it was useless. While lying in bed, I could feel a slight vibration, as if the Griffin were alive under my skin, waiting for the right moment to reveal itself again. I didn't sleep at all. The next day, the sensation didn't improve. At work, I felt uncomfortable, as if my arm had a life of its own. I started wearing long sleeves, something I didn't usually do, just to avoid seeing the tattoo. But the sensation was there, growing stronger. And the worst part was that now I didn't only feel it at night. During the day, in moments of calm, I felt something moving under the skin, as if it were trying to stretch, as if it wanted to get out. The most disturbing thing happened one afternoon when I was with a group of friends. We were at a cafe, talking about everyday things, and suddenly one of them looked at me with curiosity. "Have you done something else to the tattoo?" he asked. I froze. "No, why?" I replied cautiously. It looks different. I don't know, bigger, more realistic." I tried to laugh it off, make a joke, but fear took hold of me. After that, I couldn't ignore what was happening. How could I? Every time I looked in the mirror, the Griffin seemed different. It was as if it was gaining details that weren't there before, as if it was evolving. Even the shadows on its body seemed to change direction depending on how I looked at it. And its claws. I could swear the claws were now sharper, as if they were preparing to attack. I tried to reason with the situation. I thought maybe it was psychological, that my mind was projecting things. I started researching tattoos, how the skin reacts over time, but nothing I found explained what was happening to me. I searched forums, read stories about strange tattoo experiences, but none resembled mine. That's when I decided to return to the tattoo studio to see if the tattoo artist could give me an explanation. Maybe he had used a different ink, or something was wrong with the process. When I arrived, the tattoo artist looked confused. I explained what was happening, and although at first I thought he would laugh, his face turned serious. He looked at my arm and, after a few minutes of silence, said, "I've never seen anything like this. The ink shouldn't move, it shouldn't do this." I left the studio more confused and scared than ever. How was it possible that something like this was happening? What did it all mean? There had to be an explanation, something logical that could calm me, but the more I tried to understand it, the more I sank into uncertainty. Every night, the Griffin seemed to move a little more. Not in big gestures, but as if it came to life in small movements. Its wings fluttered subtly, its claws tightened, and its eyes, those eyes followed me wherever I went. By the time I reached the third week, the situation had become unbearable. The tattoo was no longer just a strange curiosity or something I could ignore. The Griffin was coming to life, and the worst part was that it seemed aware of my presence. It was starting to move more frequently, not just at night. Sometimes, I could see it flexing its wings during the day, stretching its claws as if testing its limits within my skin. I began to isolate myself from people. I didn't want anyone else to see it. My friends had started asking uncomfortable questions, and every time I tried to explain, they looked at me as if I were losing my mind. Maybe I was. How do you explain that a tattoo is alive? I felt like the protagonist of a horror story where no one believed me. And in a way, that's exactly what I was. One night, while I was in my apartment, something happened that changed everything. I was sitting on the couch, trying to distract myself with the TV, when I felt a sharp pain in my arm. It was as if something inside my skin was scratching to get out. I looked at the tattoo, and there it was, the Griffin, in full motion. It wasn't a simple adjustment in its posture or a slight tremor. This time, it was moving deliberately. Its claws were scratching my skin from the inside, and its wings were flapping violently. I tried to scream, but fear paralyzed me. The pain was unbearable, as if something was trying to tear me apart from the inside. I gripped my arm with the other hand, trying to stop whatever was happening, but it was useless. The Griffin kept moving, with increasing force. I felt as if my skin was about to burst. At that moment, something happened that I will never forget. The Griffin, now clearly visible, turned, and for a moment, its ink eyes met mine. There was intelligence there, a malice that made me recoil. It was no longer just a tattoo. It was something more, something ancient, something I didn't understand but was clearly angry, and hungry. I jumped up, staggering, trying to process what had just happened. But there was no time to think. The pain wouldn't stop, and the Griffin kept moving, as if it were searching for a way out. I ran to the bathroom and turned on the cold water tap, letting the stream hit my arm directly. I had no idea if it would help, but it was the only thing I could think of at that moment. To my surprise, the cold water seemed to calm the movement. The Griffin stopped, though it didn't disappear. It was still there, its presence tangible under my skin, but it was no longer writhing. However, its gaze remained fixed on me, as if waiting for the right moment to act again. That night, I couldn't sleep. I sat on the edge of the bed, watching the tattoo, waiting for it to move again. But it didn't. It remained still, as if the water had temporarily pacified it. But deep down, I knew this was just the beginning. The next day was even worse. While I was in a work meeting, I felt the tattoo starting to move again, as if it were waking up. At first, it was just a small tremor, but it quickly intensified. I excused myself hurriedly and ran to the nearest bathroom. Once there, I rolled up my shirt sleeve and watched in horror as the Griffin writhed with fury under my skin. I couldn't take it anymore. I couldn't keep ignoring it. I knew something supernatural was happening, something that defied all logic. I decided to seek help. Not from doctors or tattoo artists, because clearly they didn't know what to do, but from someone who could understand what was happening to me. I began researching mythology, magical creatures, the possible relationship between the symbolic and the real. I read about ancient beliefs, about how griffins were not only guardians of treasures but also beings that could become linked to people if invoked incorrectly. It was during one of these searches that I found a legend, one that spoke of tattoos containing powerful spirits trapped in the skin of their bearer. It was said that if the tattoo was not done with due respect, or if the creature represented was not treated with reverence, it could try to free itself from its bearer. The stories were vague, but there was enough in them to make me believe this wasn't a mere coincidence. Had I done something wrong by choosing the Griffin? Had I unknowingly invoked a creature that now wanted to escape? I didn't know what to do, but the pain and fear were real, and they were intensifying every day. I decided that I couldn't stay inactive. The night I decided to confront the danger was unlike any other. I knew I had to do something drastic, something to stop the torment the Griffin was causing. I couldn't continue living with the constant fear that the tattoo might get out of control. I felt trapped, both physically and mentally. I had read that some cultures used purification rituals to deal with hostile entities. So I decided to put into practice what I had learned. I had little left to lose. I prepared for what seemed like my last hope, a simple but powerful ritual based on ancient practices I had found in my research. If there was any chance of calming the Griffin or freeing myself from it, it was now or never. First, I prepared the space. I cleaned it thoroughly, making sure everything was in order. I placed candles around my room, creating a circle of light. It wasn't a complicated ritual, but I felt strange doing it, as if I were invoking something I couldn't control. I lit incense, a scent that was supposed to purify the environment, and began reciting words that, although I didn't fully understand, seemed to have a special power in the context of the legend. With the circle prepared, I undressed from the waist up, exposing the tattoo. I sat in the center of the circle of candles, and looking at my arm, I began to recite the words I had found in ancient texts. It was an invocation for calm, a plea for the Griffin's spirit to be appeased and to stop. My hands trembled as I spoke each word, my voice filled with anxiety and determination. The Griffin seemed agitated again. I felt as if its presence intensified, as if it were aware of what I was doing. But I didn't stop. I continued with the invocation, speaking with a mix of respect and supplication. I focused on the tattoo, asking it to understand that I meant no harm, that I was only seeking peace. Suddenly, the tattoo began to move with an intensity one had never experienced before. The Griffin's claws scratched my skin from the inside, and its wings flapped violently. The pain was unbearable, but I forced myself to stay strong. Every word I spoke seemed to calm it for a moment, but the agitation didn't completely cease. At a critical moment, the Griffin seemed almost ready to break out of my skin. I felt an intense pressure, as if it were trying to break the surface. At that instant, I realized I had to finish the ritual or risk losing control completely. With all my strength, I completed the invocation, speaking the final words with a mix of faith and desperation. The incense's aroma filled the air, and the candles flickered as the circle of light remained steadfast around me. When the last word left my lips, the Griffin stopped abruptly. The pressure in my arm decreased, and the movement ceased. I felt an instant relief. I collapsed, exhausted but hopeful. The Griffin seemed to be finally calm, its presence under the skin no longer a constant threat. I woke up the next morning, with the tattoo still there, but the pain had disappeared. The Griffin no longer moved, and the feeling of agitation had been replaced by a calm I hadn't felt in weeks. I looked at myself in the mirror, and although the tattoo was still a part of me, I felt that I had regained control. I decided to see a doctor, not only to ensure there were no permanent damages, but also to seek a professional opinion on the tattoo and its possible reactions. The doctor, upon examining it, found nothing unusual in medical terms, but it was clear that my experience had been unique. What I learned from this experience was deeper than I had expected. The Griffin, with all its strength and power, was not just a design on my skin. It was a reminder that even things we consider harmless can have a life of their own if we don't give them the respect they deserve. Now, when I look at the tattoo, I see more than just art. I see a lesson, a warning about forces we don't fully understand. In the end, what seemed like a horror story became an opportunity to learn and grow. Although I will never again underestimate something I choose to carry with me, I also note that I am not alone in facing the unknown. If you ever find yourself in a similar situation, remember that sometimes what seems like a simple problem can be an opportunity to confront your fears and gain a new perspective. I hope you found value in my story. If you've ever had a similar experience or have your own stories of tattoos getting out of control, I'd love to hear from you. How did you handle it? What did you learn? Leave your comments below and share your experience. Thank you for joining me on this unsettling adventure. Looking back, my experience with the Griffin tattoo has taught me much more than I imagined. What started as a simple art choice turned into a test of endurance and self-understanding. I learned that things we consider harmless can have deep meanings and unforeseen effects. My story with the Griffin is a reminder that we must approach our decisions with respect and attention, especially when dealing with powerful symbols. Today, the Griffin remains a part of me, but instead of a reminder of fear, it is a lesson in courage and adaptation. The experience has given me a new perspective on how to face the unknown and handle the unexpected. If you enjoyed this story and found yourself intrigued by what can happen when things go beyond expectations, I'd love to hear your thoughts. Have you ever had a similar experience with a tattoo or any other aspect of your life? Share your story in the comments. Your experience could help others face their own challenges. Thank you for joining me on this journey, and I look forward to your comments.